Have you ever felt as if the air around you was thick with secrets, waiting to be unveiled? That was how Rose felt that night as she prepared for the grand dinner at the palace. The ballroom gleamed with the light of 1,000 candles, their flames dancing and reflecting in the golden mirrors and the crystal chandeliers. The effect was breathtaking, turning the already grand hall into a realm of light and shadows in constant motion. Rose moved quietly among the guests, her simple green linen dress contrasting starkly with the extravagant attire of the nobility. To inattentive eyes, she was nearly invisible, just another servant tending to the event's details. But her eyes were in constant motion, capturing every detail, every gesture, every exchanged glance. As she adjusted a floral arrangement near one of the large arched windows, Rose noticed Lady Amelia in a whispered conversation with a noble she did not recognize. The man was tall and lean, with grey hair and an angular face that seemed chiseled from stone. There was urgency in his gestures, a tension in their voices that Rose could sense even from a distance. "We can't wait any longer," the man murmured urgently. "Time is running out." Lady Amelia shook her head, her voice trembling in a way Rose had never heard before. "It's too risky. If we don't act now, it will be too late," the man interrupted, his eyes gleaming with an intensity that made Rose shiver. At that moment, Lady Amelia noticed Rose and immediately softened her tone, her voice returning to its usual softness, though Rose could detect an underlying note of tension. "Oh dear Rose, these flowers are simply divine tonight." Rose forced a smile, trying to steady her trembling hands. "Thank you, Lady Amelia. I'm glad they please." The grey-haired man studied Rose with a piercing gaze that made her feel as though she was being dissected. There was something in his eyes, a mix of curiosity and calculation that left her deeply uncomfortable. "So, this is the famous Palace Florist," he remarked, his voice soft but with a note of interest Rose could not ignore. "I've heard much about your talent, Miss—" "Rose, sir. Just Rose," she replied, struggling to keep her voice steady under the scrutiny of that intense gaze. "Rose," he repeated, as if savoring the name. "A fitting name for someone with your gift." Before Rose could respond, a commotion near the entrance to the ballroom caught her attention. The captain of the Royal Guard, Charles, had arrived, his uniform immaculate and his posture rigid, contrasting with the festive atmosphere of the ballroom. Rose could not help but notice how Charles's arrival caused Lady Amelia and the stranger to exchange a quick, meaningful glance. There was a story there, a secret she could not decipher, but which made her heart race with a mixture of fear and excitement. As the evening progressed, Rose continued her work, moving among the guests like a shadow, adjusting flowers here and there. But her thoughts were far away, lost in a maze of possibilities and suspicions. What was happening behind the scenes at the palace? What secrets were being whispered in the shadows, far from the prying eyes of the court? And more importantly, what role would Rose play in all of this? As the hours passed and the dinner drew to a close, Rose could not shake the feeling that she was on the brink of something significant, something that would change her life forever. She looked at the flowers she had arranged with such care, their delicate petals holding secrets she was only just beginning to comprehend. That night, as the last candles extinguished and silence fell over the palace, Rose lay in her simple bed, her dreams filled with dancing shadows and enigmatic whispers. The world she knew was about to change, and she, a mere florist, was at the center of it all. Have you ever felt as though destiny was weaving an intricate web around you, intertwining seemingly unrelated events into a pattern that would only reveal itself at the right moment? That was exactly how Rose felt on the morning after the grand dinner. The sun had barely risen when Rose was already in her sanctuary, the royal garden. Dew still glistened on the petals of the flowers, creating a display of light that filled Rose's heart with joy. But today, not even the serene beauty of the garden could calm the restlessness consuming her. As she worked, delicately adjusting the arrangements that had been disturbed during the night, her thoughts constantly returned to the conversation she had witnessed between Lady Amelia and the mysterious grey-haired nobleman. There had been an urgency in their words, a sense of impending danger that Rose couldn't ignore. It was then that she noticed something strange, a small piece of paper, almost imperceptible, wedged between the petals of a red rose in the central arrangement. Her heart raced, a mixture of fear and excitement coursing through her veins. How had this escaped her notice? She, who knew each flower, each leaf in her arrangements as if they were extensions of her own being. Looking around to make sure no one was watching, Rose delicately removed the note. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded it, the soft paper between her fingers calloused from constant work with flowers. The nightingale sings at midnight. The crown is stained with blood. Beware of the shadows that move on the walls. Rose felt a chill run down her spine, the cryptic words echoing in her mind. What did it mean? Her first instinct was to deliver the note to the palace authorities, but something held her back. The message was clearly a code, and whoever had written it had taken a great risk in doing so. There was more at stake here than a mere lost note. "Is everything all right, Miss Rose?" The deep voice startled her, pulling her abruptly from her thoughts. It was Charles, the captain of the Royal Guard, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her swallow hard. How had he approached so silently? "Yes, sir. Just adjusting the flowers," she replied, quickly hiding the note up her sleeve. Her heart was pounding so loudly she feared Charles could hear it. Charles nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the garden with a gaze that seemed to capture every detail. "It's a beautiful morning, isn't it? Perfect for contemplating the beauty of flowers and reflecting on the events of last night." Rose felt the weight of his words, the implication behind them. There was a tension in Charles that she had never noticed before, a vigilance that went beyond his usual duties. "Yes, sir. The dinner was a success, from what I could observe." "Observe," Charles repeated, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. "A valuable skill, don't you think, Miss Rose? Seeing what others do not, hearing what is unspoken." Rose felt her heart skip a beat. Did he know about the note? Did he suspect something? I just tend to the flowers, sir. I don't pay much attention to court matters." Charles laughed softly, but his eyes remained serious. "Sometimes, Miss Rose, it's those who seem not to pay attention who see and hear the most. Have a good day." As Charles walked away, blending with the shadows of the garden, Rose felt the note burning against her sleeve, as if its weight might tear through the fabric at any moment. What was she supposed to do? Ignore it and pretend she had never seen it? Or dive headfirst into a mystery that could cost her life? The garden remained serene around her, the flowers swaying gently in the morning breeze. But for Rose, the world had changed. Every smile, every glance, every whisper now carried a new meaning, a potential for danger or revelation. And at the heart of it all was her, a simple florist, holding in her hands a secret that could shake the foundations of the kingdom. Rose looked at the flowers around her, their vibrant colors and delicate forms suddenly seeming to hold deeper secrets than she had ever imagined. What did fate have in store for her? And more importantly, did she have the courage to face what was to come? Have you ever felt as if the past was whispering in your ear, trying to tell you long-forgotten secrets? That was how Rose felt that night as she prepared to sleep in her small room in the back of the palace. The mysterious note still weighed on her mind, its cryptic words echoing in her thoughts. "The nightingale sings at midnight," Rose murmured to herself, the words dancing in the flickering candlelight on her bedside table. Suddenly, a distant memory surfaced in her mind, so vivid that for a moment she could almost smell the damp earth and hear the birdsong from her childhood. Her father, a palace gardener before her, used to tell stories about secrets hidden in the royal gardens. One of them, a story she had nearly forgotten, mentioned an old clock hidden somewhere in the palace that played a nightingale's melody at midnight. Rose felt her heart quicken, a thrill of discovery mingling with the fear of the unknown. Could it be that her father's story wasn't merely a tale to entertain a curious child? And if it were true, what else from her father's stories could be real? Determined to learn more, she carefully hid the note under a loose floorboard in her room and prepared to set out. The palace at night was a different place, full of shadows and secrets, but Rose knew its paths better than most. With silent steps, she slipped through the dark corridors, her senses heightened to pick up every sound, every movement. The silence of the night was broken only by the occasional creak of a floorboard or the distant murmur of a nocturnal conversation. As she walked, Rose reflected on her life at the palace. Since childhood, following in her father's footsteps, she had learned to move unnoticed, to listen without seeming to listen. These skills, once just part of her job, now took on a new meaning. She was more than just a florist, she was a silent observer, a keeper of secrets she hadn't even known she possessed. As she rounded a corner, she nearly collided with a hooded figure. Her heart leapt to her throat when she recognized the piercing eyes of Charles beneath the hood. What was the captain of the Royal Guard doing prowling the corridors at this hour, disguised as an ordinary man? "Miss Rose," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and suspicion. "What are you doing awake at this hour?" Rose struggled to maintain her composure, her mind racing to find a plausible explanation. I couldn't sleep, sir. Sometimes I walk to clear my mind." Charles studied her for a long moment, his eyes seeming to pierce her soul. There was something in his gaze, a mix of caution and something else. Concern, perhaps. "The palace corridors can be dangerous at night, Rose. There are shadows best avoided." The words of the note echoed in her mind. "Beware of the shadows that move on the walls." Was Charles part of those shadows? Or was he, like her, seeking "I'll return to my room now." As she walked away, Rose could feel Charles's eyes on her back, the weight of his gaze almost as heavy as the secret she carried. What was he doing there at that hour? And why was he wearing a hood, as if he wanted to hide his identity? Back in her room, Rose sat on the edge of her bed, her mind swirling with unanswered questions. The note, her father's stories, her encounter with Charles, it all seemed connected somehow. But how? What was the invisible thread linking these seemingly disparate events? She looked out of her window, watching the garden shadows dance under the moonlight. Somewhere out there, a nightingale began to sing, its sweet melancholic melody echoing through the night. Rose felt a chill run down her spine. The past was alive, whispering secrets in the shadows, and she was at the center of it all. At that moment, as the nightingale's song mingled with the soft rustling of leaves in the wind, Rose made a decision. She would no longer be a passive spectator of the events around her. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. But as the nightingale's song faded into the night, giving way to the heavy silence of the sleeping palace, she couldn't help but wonder, was she walking towards the truth or her own destruction? Have you ever felt as if you were ensnared in an invisible web, where every movement only tangled you deeper? That was how Rose felt in the days that followed her discovery of the mysterious note. The days passed in a whirlwind for Rose. Every bouquet she created seemed to carry additional weight, each petal potentially hiding another secret. Her eyes, once focused solely on the beauty of flowers, now constantly scanned the faces around her, searching for clues, signs, anything that could shed light on the mystery that had fallen into her lap. She began noticing patterns that had previously gone unnoticed, the way certain nobles gathered in dark corners, their voices low and urgent, the furtive glances exchanged between supposed. Even the rhythm of footsteps in the corridors seemed to contain coded messages. One afternoon, while working in the Grand Hall, Rose overheard a conversation between Lady Amelia and the grey-haired nobleman she had seen on the night of the dinner. "The plan is underway," the nobleman murmured. "We'll act on the next full moon." Rose's heart pounded. She needed to inform someone, but who? Charles with his suspicious movements at night? Lady Amelia, who seemed at the center of it all? Or should she trust only herself? As she weighed her options, Rose noticed something odd in one of the flower arrangements. A single red tulip had been placed among the white lilies, a combination she certainly hadn't made. Her heart skipped a beat. Could this be a sign? A message from someone who knew more than they appeared to? That night, unable to sleep, Rose decided to explore the palace further. She remembered a secret passage her father had mentioned years ago, hidden behind a panel in the library. With careful steps, she made her way through the dark corridors. The library was quiet and somber, the tall shelves casting long shadows on the marble floor. Rose moved silently between the rows of books, her fingers gliding over dusty spines until she found the panel her father had described. With a soft click, the panel opened, revealing a narrow, dark passage. Rose hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. Was she truly ready to dive so deeply into the palace's secrets? Before she could decide, the sound of footsteps echoed through the library. Panic gripped her as she searched for a place to hide. At the last moment, she slipped into the secret passage, closing the panel behind her. In the dark, Rose held her breath, listening intently. The footsteps drew nearer, paused briefly near where she was hidden, and then receded again. When she finally dared to breathe again, Rose realized she was at a crossroads, both literally and figuratively. The secret passage stretched before her, leading to an unknown destination. Turning back would mean risking discovery. With a trembling sigh, she stepped forward into the darkness. There was no turning back now. She was about to uncover secrets the palace had kept for generations. As she advanced through the narrow passage, Rose couldn't help but think of how drastically her life had changed in such a short time. From a simple florist to an explorer of hidden truths, she was walking a path she had never imagined existed. The air in the passage was heavy and damp, filled with the scent of mold and ancient secrets. Every step she took echoed softly, making her fear being discovered at any moment. But she persisted, driven by a curiosity that outweighed her fear. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened into a small circular chamber. In the center, illuminated by a faint beam of moonlight that filtered through a crack in the ceiling, was an object that made Rose's heart leap. An ancient clock, ornately carved with birds and flowers. Could this be the clock mentioned in her father's stories, the one that played the nightingale's melody at midnight? As she approached to examine the clock more closely, Rose heard a sound that made her freeze in place. Footsteps coming from the passage behind her. Someone was coming. And Rose, trapped in this secret chamber, had nowhere to hide. Have you ever felt cornered with your heart beating so loudly it seemed as though it might leap from your chest? That's how Rose felt in that moment, standing in the secret chamber, the sound of footsteps drawing closer and closer. Her eyes darted frantically around the room, searching, but the circular chamber was devoid of furniture or curtains, offering only the old clock as a solitary focal point. Desperately, Rose did the only thing she could. She positioned herself behind the clock, trying to make herself as small as possible. The scent of old metal and oil filled her nose as she held her breath, praying she wouldn't be discovered. The footsteps halted at the chamber's entrance. Rose could hear the soft sound of breathing, and then a voice she recognized immediately. "You can come out, Rose, I know you're here." It was Lord Clark, the grey-haired nobleman she had seen speaking to Lady Amelia. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but Rose could sense a steely undertone. Trembling, she stepped out from behind the clock, her eyes meeting Lord Clark's. To her surprise, he didn't seem angry. Instead, there was a glint of approval in his eyes. "Impressive," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "You found the clock. Few know of its existence, and fewer still its location." Rose felt her head spin with confusion. Did you expect me to find it?" Lord Clark nodded slowly. "In a way, yes. We've been watching you for some time, Rose. Your attention to detail, your discretion, your ability to see what others do not, these are rare and valuable qualities." Rose felt a chill run down her spine. The realization hit her like a wave. She had been manipulated, guided to this very moment from the beginning. You know about the note?" "Oh yes," Lord Clark replied, his smile widening in a way that made Rose feel even more vulnerable. "In fact, it was I who left it there." Rose's world seemed to spin. All her suspicions, all the mysteries of recent days, converged on this moment. But why? "Because we needed someone like you, Rose, someone observant, discreet, with access to all parts of the palace, someone who could see what others don't." Lord Clark spoke with a mixture of admiration and calculation that left Rose bewildered. Rose took a step back, feeling the cold metal of the clock against her back. She was cornered, not only physically but also by the web of intrigue that had been woven around her. "What exactly is happening here, Lord Clark?" His smile faded, replaced by an expression of gravity that made Rose realize the true seriousness of the situation. "A conspiracy, my dear, one that threatens not only the crown but the entire kingdom, and now you're part of it. Rose felt the weight of his words fall over her like an avalanche. Her life as she knew it was over. From this moment on, she was caught up in a world of secrets and dangers that she could barely comprehend. Lord Clark moved closer to the clock, his fingers tracing its delicate carvings. This clock, Rose, is more than it appears. It's a key to a power that few can imagine, and you, my dear, have just proven yourself worthy of guarding this secret. Rose looked from the clock back to Lord Clark, her mind reeling with the implications of what she was hearing. "And if I refuse to participate?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear threatening to consume her. Clark's eyes hardened, all pretense of gentleness vanishing in an instant. "Then I fear your safety cannot be guaranteed. You already know too much, Rose. In this game, there are no innocent bystanders." Fear tightened Rose's chest, but with it came an unexpected wave of determination. If what Clark said was true, the fate of the kingdom could depend on her actions. She thought of everyone she knew in the palace, the other servants, the kind guards, even the nobles who, despite their flaws, didn't deserve to be victims of treachery. "What exactly do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice firmer than she felt. Clark smiled, satisfied. It was the smile of a player who had just seen their wager pay off. "For now, continue with your normal routine, but keep your eyes and ears open. Pay special attention to Lady Amelia and Captain Charles. They are key players in this game, though perhaps they don't know it yet." Rose nodded slowly, her mind already working through the implications. She remembered the glances exchanged between Lady Amelia and Charles, the whispered conversations she had witnessed. "And how should I report what I find?" "Through the flowers, of course," Clark replied with a twinkle in his eye. "We'll develop a code. Each flower, each arrangement will carry a message. No one will suspect the florist simply doing her job." As Clark explained the details of the floral code, Rose felt as though she were being swept along by a powerful current. Part of her wanted to step back, to return to the safety of her simple life among the roses and lilies. But another part, one she barely recognized, was exhilarated by the challenge, by the chance to make a difference. "Remember, Rose," Clark concluded, his voice heavy with seriousness, "from now on, every move you make could have consequences. Be cautious, be clever, and above all, trust no one completely." With those words, he turned to leave, but paused at the entrance to the secret passage. "Oh, and Rose, the clock. It will chime at midnight. When you hear its melody, you'll know it's time to act." And with that, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving Rose alone with the ancient clock and the weight of a kingdom on her shoulders. As she made her way back through the maze of secret passages, Rose couldn't help but marvel at the turn her life had taken. Just a few days ago, her biggest concern was creating the perfect arrangement for the royal dinner. Now, she was a central player in a game of intrigue and power that could determine the future of the entire kingdom. The nightingale's song followed her through the garden as she finally emerged into the cool night air, a bittersweet melody that seemed to echo the complexity of her new reality. Rose knew that from that moment on, every flower she touched, every word she spoke, might be part of something much larger than she had ever imagined. With a heavy but determined heart, Rose returned to her quarters, knowing that when the sun rose, it would mark the first day of her new life as a secret agent at the heart of the palace. Have you ever imagined that a simple bouquet could hold secrets capable of changing a kingdom's destiny? For Rose, this fantastic notion had become her new reality. In the days following her conversation with Lord Clark, Rose found herself living a double life. By day, she continued her work as a florist, crafting stunning arrangements for palace events. But now every flower she chose, every leaf she positioned, carried a hidden meaning. She developed a complex communication system through flowers. Red roses signaled imminent danger, while white lilies indicated that all was calm. The position of leaves, the number of thorns left on a stem, even the amount of water in the vases, everything became part of an elaborate code that only she and Lord Clark understood. One morning, while working in the main garden, Rose noticed Lady Amelia hurrying towards the royal chambers, a look of worry on her usually serene face. Discreetly, Rose inserted a yellow carnation into a nearby arrangement, the agreed-upon signal for suspicious activity. Hours later, while adjusting flowers in a corridor, she saw Lord Clark passing by. Their eyes met briefly, and he made an almost imperceptible gesture towards the arrangement. Rose knew he had received the message. As the days passed, Rose began to notice patterns in the palace's movements that had previously gone unnoticed. She observed how certain nobles always gathered after sunset in a specific wing of the palace, or how guards changed positions at unusual times during the night. Each new piece of information was carefully encoded in her floral arrangements. A daffodil here, an orchid there. Each flower told a story, revealed a secret. But with each new secret discovered, Rose felt the weight of her responsibility grow. She was no longer just an observer. Her actions now had the potential to shape the future of the kingdom, and with that knowledge came a constant fear of being discovered. One afternoon, while working on an especially complex arrangement, both in beauty and in coded message, Rose heard footsteps approaching. She froze, her heart racing when she recognized Captain Charles's voice. "Impressive as always, Miss Rose," said Charles, his gaze sweeping over the arrangement with an intensity that made Rose wonder if he could somehow decipher the hidden code. "Thank you, sir," she replied, struggling to keep her voice calm. "Just doing my job." Charles smiled, but there was something in his eyes that Rose couldn't decipher. "Your work is more valuable than you think, Miss Rose. Flowers, they have the power to lift a room's spirit, don't they? To change the atmosphere of a place." Rose felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in Charles's words, a suggestion she couldn't ignore. Could he know? Could he also be part of this game of secrets and conspiracies? "Flowers hold many powers, sir," she replied carefully. "Some people even say they can tell stories." Charles's smile widened. "Stories, is it? Fascinating. I'd love to hear some of those stories one day, Miss Rose." With a nod, he walked away, leaving Rose with a racing heart and a mind whirling with questions. She looked at the arrangement she had created, the flowers suddenly seeming more dangerous than beautiful. That night, as she prepared to sleep, Rose couldn't help but wonder what exactly she had gotten herself into. The world of flowers, once her haven of peace and beauty, now seemed a minefield of secrets and dangers. And as sleep finally took her, she dreamed of a garden where every flower whispered secrets, and where shadows danced between the beds, always watching, always waiting. Have you ever felt as though you were walking on thin ice, where every step could plunge you into icy, treacherous waters? That was how Rose felt in the weeks that followed, each day bringing new discoveries and new dangers. One night, as she worked late in her floral room, Rose heard voices coming from a nearby corridor. Silently she approached, recognizing the voices of Lady Amelia and Charles. "Everything is set," Charles was whispering. "On the night of the masquerade ball, we'll make our final move." Rose's heart raced. The masquerade was only 3 days away. She had to alert Clark immediately, but before she could move, a strong hand seized her arm. Rose turned, ready to scream, only to find herself face to face with Lord Clark. "Silence," he whispered, pulling her away from the voices. "You've done well, Rose, but now the real test begins." Clark quickly explained the plan. They would let the conspirators believe their plot would succeed, only to capture them in the act. Rose would play a crucial role. "You will be our eyes and ears during the ball," Clark said. "Under the guise of a simple florist, you can move freely, observe and report without raising suspicion." Rose felt fear and excitement battling within her. This would be the decisive moment, the climax of everything she had worked towards over the past weeks. "And if something goes wrong?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Clark looked into her eyes, his expression grave. "Then, my dear, the fate of the kingdom will rest in your hands." The days leading up to the masquerade were a whirlwind of preparations. Rose worked tirelessly, creating arrangements more elaborate than ever. Every flower, every leaf was chosen not just for its beauty, but for its potential to conceal secret messages. As she worked, her mind raced. Who were the true traitors? Lady Amelia and Charles, whom she had overheard plotting? Or was there more to this story than she could see? And Lord Clark? Was he truly on the side of the crown? Or was he playing an even more complex game? Rose knew that soon all her questions would be answered. But as the hours passed and the ball approached, she couldn't help but wonder, when the music stopped and the masks came off, whose side would she really be on? With these doubts weighing on her heart, Rose continued her work, each flower a secret, each arrangement a silent promise that no matter what happened, she would do what she believed was right for the kingdom she had sworn to protect. Have you ever felt as though you were about to step onto a stage where every movement you made would be watched and judged? That was how Rose felt on the night of the masquerade ball, her heart beating frantically as she added the final touches to the elaborate floral arrangements that decorated the ballroom. The palace glowed with thousands of candles, their flames dancing and reflecting in golden mirrors and crystal chandeliers. The air was thick with the scent of flowers and the palpable anticipation of the masked guests who were beginning to arrive. Rose moved among the guests, her own face hidden behind an elaborate mask made of leaves and small flowers. Her eyes were constantly scanning, watching every detail, every suspicious movement. She saw Lady Amelia chatting animatedly with a group of nobles, her peacock mask glinting in the candlelight. Charles stood near the main entrance, his posture rigid and alert, and in a distant corner, almost hidden in the shadows, Rose glimpsed Lord Clark, his eyes meeting hers for a brief moment. As the night wore on, the tension in the air seemed to grow thicker. Rose could feel that something was about to happen. She discreetly approached a group of guards she knew to be loyal to Clark, exchanging significant glances with them. Suddenly, a shout cut through the music. "For the freedom of the kingdom!" Chaos erupted in the ballroom. Masks fell, revealing determined faces. Swords were drawn, the metallic sound echoing against the ornate walls. Rose saw Charles advancing towards the king, his sword raised. Without thinking, she grabbed a heavy vase from a nearby pedestal and hurled it, striking Charles in the back. He stumbled, giving the loyal guards enough time to overpower him. Lady Amelia tried to flee, but Rose, using her knowledge of the palace's secret corridors, managed to intercept her, delaying her long enough for her to be captured. In a matter of minutes, though it felt like an eternity to Rose, the rebellion was quelled. The conspirators were detained and the king was safe. Lord Clark found Rose amidst the chaos, his face glowing with pride. "You did it, Rose. You saved the kingdom." But as Clark's words of praise echoed in her ears, Rose couldn't help but notice something strange in his eyes. A shadow of disappointment, as if things hadn't gone exactly as he'd planned. Rose felt a chill run down her spine. Did she really know the whole truth? Or were there still more secrets lurking in the palace shadows? In the days following the masquerade, the palace buzzed with rumors and speculation. The truth about the conspiracy gradually surfaced, revealing itself to be more complex and ancient than anyone had imagined. Rose discovered that the plot went far beyond Lady Amelia and Charles. High-ranking nobles, palace officials, even members of the royal family were implicated. Each new revelation made her heart sink, reminding her how deceptive appearances could be. One afternoon, while working in the garden, trying to find peace among her beloved flowers, Rose was surprised by the arrival. He walked calmly towards her, his face weary but kind. "Rose," he said softly, "you have rendered a great service to the kingdom. Your role in uncovering this conspiracy has not gone unnoticed." Rose bowed deeply, feeling both honored and uncomfortable with the direct praise from the monarch. "Your Majesty, I simply did what I believed was right." The king smiled, a sad smile that spoke of many sleepless nights. "Sometimes, doing what is right is the hardest thing of all." "Tell me, Rose, what do you think of all this?" The question caught Rose off guard. She hesitated, carefully weighing her words. "Your Majesty, I fear that there is still much we do not know. Perhaps not all those involved have been revealed." The king nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You are wise beyond your years, Rose. Stay vigilant. Your eyes and ears may be more needed than ever in the days to come." With these enigmatic words, the king walked away, leaving Rose with more questions than answers. She couldn't help but think of Lord Clark, of the shadows in his eyes on the night of the masquerade. There was something more going on, something she still couldn't clearly see. That night, as she arranged flowers in her room, Rose heard a soft knock at her door. Upon opening it, she found a small folded note on the floor. With trembling hands, she opened it. "The nightingale still sings at midnight. The crown is still in danger. Meet me where it all began." Rose's heart raced. The message could only be from Lord Clark. But why? What more was there to reveal? With renewed determination, Rose prepared for another nocturnal journey through the palace's secret corridors. She knew she was heading into the unknown, possibly into danger, but she also knew she couldn't ignore this call. As she moved silently towards the secret chamber where the old clock was hidden, Rose couldn't help but wonder, was she about to discover the ultimate truth behind this entire conspiracy? Or was she walking straight into a trap? The distant song of a nightingale echoed through the corridors, as if guiding her steps. Rose took a deep breath, gathering all her courage. Whatever awaited her, she was determined to face it, for she had learned that in the palace's game of shadows and secrets, the truth was the most powerful weapon of all. Have you ever felt as though you were walking towards your destiny, each step echoing with the weight of history? That was how Rose felt as she made her way through the palace's secret corridors, heading toward the chamber where the ancient clock was hidden. The air was heavy with moisture and the scent of ancient secrets. Rose could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, competing with the soft jingling of the keys that hung from her belt as she moved. When she finally reached the circular chamber, she stopped, her breath caught in her throat. Lord Clark was there, standing beside the clock, his imposing figure illuminated by the faint light seeping in through a crack in the ceiling. "Ah, Rose," he said, his voice echoing softly in the chamber. "You came. I knew you would." Rose took a step forward, her mind filled with questions. "Why did you call me here, Lord Clark? What else is there to reveal?" Clark smiled, but it was a sad smile, one filled with weight. "The truth, my dear. The ultimate truth that few know." He turned to the clock, his fingers tracing its intricate carvings. "This clock, Rose, is more than it appears. It is the key to an ancient power, one that has protected this kingdom for generations." Rose felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of power?" "The power to see the future," Clark replied, his eyes shining with an intensity Rose had never seen before. "Those who possess it can guide the kingdom through the storms of fate, averting disasters before they form." Rose was speechless, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. But that's impossible." Clark laughed softly. "Many things are impossible until they are done, my dear. This clock has been the true power behind the throne for centuries, and now the time has come to pass this power to the next generation." He turned to face her fully, his eyes piercing into hers. "To you, Rose." Rose felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "Me? But why? I'm just a florist." "You are much more than that, Rose," Clark said gently. "You have the gift of seeing what others do not, of understanding the silent language of flowers and secrets. You have proven yourself worthy of this power." Rose looked at the clock, then back at Clark, her mind whirling with the implications of what she was hearing. "And the conspiracy? The masquerade?" "A test," Clark admitted. "A final test to see if you were ready for this responsibility, and you passed with distinction." Rose took a step back, feeling the weight of this revelation. "And if I refuse?" Clark's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then the kingdom will be left vulnerable. Without someone to guide it through the visions of the clock, who knows what dangers may arise?" Rose stood in silence for a long moment, her gaze shifting between Clark and the clock. Finally, she spoke, her voice firm despite the trembling in her hands. "I accept." Clark smiled, a true smile of relief and pride. "I knew you would make the right choice, Rose. Now come, there is much you need to learn." As Rose approached the clock, she felt as though she were crossing an invisible threshold. Her life as she knew it was over. A new journey was about to begin, one filled with responsibilities and powers beyond her imagination. The clock began to chime softly, its melody echoing through the chamber like the song of a nightingale. And with each note, Rose felt the future unfolding before her, a tapestry of infinite possibilities. She was now the guardian of time, the protector of the kingdom. And as the last note of the melody faded, Rose knew that her true story was only just beginning. Years passed, and the legend of the florist who saved the kingdom grew and spread. In the palace gardens, among the roses and lilies, people told the story of Rose, the guardian of time, whose gentle hands did not just arrange flowers, but also wove the very threads of destiny. Lily, now a wise and mature woman, continued her mentor's legacy. Under her care, the palace garden became a place of unparalleled beauty and deep secrets. Each flower, each arrangement, carried not only beauty, but also the lessons and wisdom Rose had left behind. And on silent nights, when the moon bathed the garden in its silver light, some swore they could hear the soft ticking of an ancient clock, mingled with the melodious song of a nightingale. The kingdom prospered, protected by the knowledge passed down from guardian to guardian, each one a unique flower in the vast garden of time. And in every petal, in every leaf, Rose's spirit lived on, reminding all that the greatest powers often come from the most unexpected places. So the story of Rose, the florist who became the guardian of time, became more than just a legend. It served as a reminder that with courage, compassion, and wisdom, even the simplest of flowers could change the course of history. And at the heart of the palace, protected by walls of stone and ancient secrets, the clock continued to mark the hours, its gears moving in sync with the kingdom's very heartbeat. A silent testament to the power of time, the beauty of flowers, and the indomitable strength of the human spirit.